Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of Affirm Meet the Expert Series 2026. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Howell Round, a well known and respected medical physicist, educator, researcher, international leader who has contributed immensely to medical physics education and professional development across our region and beyond. Dr. Round has truly a unique career, from beginning as a physics student in New Zealand to working as a hospital medical physicist, completing a PhD in engineering, building one of the first structured education and training program for medical physicists in Australia and New Zealand, and later serving in leadership roles within a firm, ACPSM, and the International Union of Physical and Engineering Sciences and Medicine. So let's welcome Dr. Howell Round. Dr. Howell Round, thank you very much for joining us today. So how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. So are you ready, sir? Should we start?
Yep.
Okay. So every career has its own turning points. Looking back, could you tell us a little more about your early years and how the mathematics and physics student eventually found his calling in medical physics? Was there a particular moment or experience that convinced you this was your field you want to pursue?
Yes, well, my introduction to medical physics started at the end of my second year of my bachelor studies. I'd gone to university to study physics and mathematics. By the end of my second year, I was getting a little bit disillusioned with the mathematics, and physics seemed to be where I wanted to go. And at that stage, the university I was studying at introduced a new degree. Instead of a 3-year bachelor's degree, it was a 4-year bachelor's degree. And the degree was structured so that you spent 2 6-month periods out in industry. And in industry could mean all sorts of different things, but it's actually, some sort of practical experience. And you're meant to be employed and paid during that experience. You also had to do some papers in management, which was quite different from anything I'd done before, but it was also quite interesting. Now, for those periods when I was out in industry, I actually got sent up to the local hospital to work with a physicist there. And of course, I had no idea beforehand there were such things as medical physicists. But I spent my first 6-month period there in a department which was a combination of radiation physics, radiation oncology, and nuclear medicine. It was a very small department, indeed, at that stage, with operating one cobalt machine and one cesium machine. Um, okay, so for my second 6 months, I spent 3 months at a factory making parts for aircraft, and I complained about that. That's not really doing physics. So I managed to get sent back to Waikato Hospital and finished my second 6 months there. And then at the end, while I was there, I was thumbing through a copy of the British Journal of Radiology, and I saw there was a medical physics and MSc at Surrey University in England. And that quite intrigued me because I'd never heard of an MSc in medical physics. And going to England was something which in those days almost every young New Zealander did. You went to England on what we called our overseas experience. You worked there, you travelled Europe, and now about 2 or 3 years you came home again. Well, this seemed a good way of actually doing that. So I applied for admission to that degree and I got in. And about 10 months after I'd finished my degree here, I started at Surrey University. It seemed like a long period to wait, but our academic year here in New Zealand is 6 months out of phase with the one up in the Northern Hemisphere. So I went up there and studied medical physics, really enjoyed it, came back to New Zealand to the same town that I had been studying in, and I got a job back at the same hospital, this time instead of as a technician, as the physicist. And I worked there for 2 years and then moved down to Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand to do a PhD. And surprisingly, not actually in physics. It was in electronics and electronic engineering. And I had to do that because there was no medical physics research at university level anywhere in New Zealand. But there was a chap called Professor Richard Bates who was doing biomedical engineering, and I studied with him for 3 years, got my PhD, and worked in Australia for 2 years as a physicist at the Royal Brisbane Hospital. Then one day when I was working there, I saw, to my surprise, an advert there for a lectureship back at my old university in physics. And I thought this is a bit of a stretch to go to academia from medical physics. I rang the prof and he was very keen for me to apply, so I did. And a few months later, um, I had a job lined up as an academic instead of being a medical physicist, with the expectation that I would develop some medical physics research at the university there. So, yeah, that's how I became an academic and spent the rest of my career as a university academic instead of a clinical medical physicist. So that was basically how I got into it and spent 32 years there lecturing in physics and electronics. It was quite an interesting time to be there, mostly because at that stage in Australia, things were changing very quickly in medical physics because the Australian government had um, commissioned a study on cancer services in Australia. And one of the things that came out of that was that there was no training program for medical physicists. And the Medical Physics Society, which is the Australasian College of Physical and Engineering Sciences in New Zealand, in medicine, which is the body for both Australia and New Zealand. That body was given a lot of money, uh, unbelievable amounts of money actually, to turn what was a very small Australasian college into a much more professional college. And suddenly we went from basically a household industry to a very professional one with offices in Sydney and quickly developing medical physics program, setting up training programs. It was an amazing experience, having come from a university where you were struggling for cash all the time to suddenly be put in a situation where there's a government watching over you, which can't shovel money to you fast enough. It was really, really quite weird. So that was a very interesting time to go into that. At that stage, we had in New Zealand the physicists getting together and saying, well, we actually do need a training program. We really haven't got a good one. And I was on study leave at that stage. So I said, well, I've got some time to spare. How about I develop it? And this was something I'd been really wanting to do because one of the big problems I found as a junior physicist, nobody seemed to know exactly what a medical physicist had to know to do their job properly. There was no training program. It was crazy. And I thought, well, this is good. I can start to set one up and we'll see how it goes. Then somebody said to me, oh, hang on, do you realise that John Drew over in Australia is also doing that? So I got on the phone to John Drew and just thought, we're doing exactly the same thing. The only sensible thing to do is to work together, where you have an educator in New Zealand and a really experienced medical physicist in Australia working on the same thing. And from us working together, we came up with a training program. And that was one of the high points of my career to actually achieve that. Yeah, so I think from that I managed to work my way up through the college. I became president of the college and then on to being the Secretary General of AFOMP and then on to the Secretary General of IUPSM. So it was quite an exciting career to go from, a backroom hospital physicist to getting right up to the top end of the medical physics world.
I think it's a remarkable journey, and I would say it's a quite a journey to experience. And the guys, the good part is because of that line placement with industry fetches such a wonderful and pioneer physicist who made a basis for the medical physicists, not just for Australia and New Zealand, for the even for the international world. So
Yep.
thank you very much, Professor Round, for such hard work you have done for the whole medical physics community. So now I'm interested to know, like, you have entered medical physics when even a name as a medical physicist was not there. So when a profession looked very different from what we see today, the training programs were limited, technology were far less advanced, and the profession itself was still evolving. And you have already explained like there were a lot of challenges. What were the biggest challenge which you feel you have encountered, and how that experience has changed your career or your perspective towards medical physics?
Um, well, I think I've already said what the biggest challenge was, that there was no training program. It was a crazy situation, and I found that very, very difficult. So the high point to me was actually changing that. Um, Certainly only intended to be for Australia and New Zealand. Then I found that the International Atomic Energy Agency was interested in what we're doing and started to take it further. They actually took John Drew up to, John was retired at that stage, and so they recruited him to go up to Vienna and work on expanding that out even further. So that was the biggest challenge for me, finding I'm in a career which nobody knows, well, nobody could tell you exactly what you had to know, and finding that I was able to put together something which actually did do that. It was originally pretty well just for radiation oncology, but as time went on, it was developed for nuclear medicine physicists, and then later for diagnostic imaging physicists. Yeah, that was sort of the big part of my career, the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even now, for the countries like India or maybe South Asian countries, or sometimes we still find it difficult to make the people understand what medical physicists or a physics people are doing in hospital. So yeah, I think it must be pretty hard at that point of time. So okay, so your career has successfully combined the clinical work, research, teaching, professional leadership over several decades. So what keep you motivated through all these different phases? Was there a personal philosophy or a driving force that encouraged you to continue contributing to medical physics long after even leaving the clinical practices?
No, it was just that I wanted to see medical physics developed. I could just see that it had some challenges, and I just wanted to help out more than anything.
I would say
And of course, when you're helping other people, you get to meet other people, and through my career, I met an amazing number of people from all around the world in different places doing different things in medical physics and contributing in different ways, and develop a wide variety of colleagues. That was quite special. Yeah.
I'm sure it's your love for the medical physicist what keeps you motivated, and I totally agree. Also, medical physics is an amazing field. It's very dynamic. It's always have a room to improvement. So yes, I think it could be a wonderful driving force. So for now, when we look at your career, there are many remarkable milestones, from establishing medical physics education programs to serving in a leadership position within a firm, ACPSM or IUPSM. Among all these achievements, which accomplishments gives you the greatest sense of satisfaction, and why does it remain particularly meaningful to you?
I think of greatest satisfaction. Um, I think the greatest satisfaction was actually being president of the Australasian College. It's certainly not the highest ranking position I ever held, but that was the good one. That was really quite special, basically because everything was so dynamic and changing so quickly. Um, and a profession which would, almost been limping along, that our college had been going for quite a few years and had developed. It had a bit of an examination program for the radiation oncology physicists to give them a certification, but it just wasn't adequate for what was needed.
I'm sure it's pretty amazing seeing changing the world of medical physics from so
Mm.
close. So, medical physics is evolving rapidly with advances in artificial intelligence, automation, data sciences, precision medicine, and increasingly sophisticated technologies. From your perspective, what excites you most about the future of our profession? Where do you see medical physics heading over in next decade, and what skills do you believe tomorrow medical physicists should develop?
I, I've been retired 10 years now, so I'm not familiar with all the advances in medical physics. Certainly, artificial intelligence I've seen as popping up everywhere now, and that is where things are definitely going. But all through my career, I've seen things developing way beyond which I would ever believe. I mean, when I started my doctorate, which was on cardiac ultrasound, we had a rather crude um, real-time cardiac scanner which gave pretty dreadful images, but we managed to get them into a computer and process them. And of course, everything was just two-dimensional. And then, years later, I saw, wow, there are 3D ultrasound images of fetuses in the room, in the womb. Um, I couldn't quite believe that they could do that from what I knew of the experience I had with ultrasound. And my master's thesis was ultrasound, my PhD was ultrasound, but what these people were doing was unbelievable. But I mean, this is the way things go. You come up with new imaging systems using quite strange techniques. I mean, I remember the first time I saw a picture of an MRI image. It was actually of an orange, where they had a cross section of an orange, and the detail in it was stunning. And you know, I couldn't have conceived of that um, 5 years before. In fact, when I was an undergraduate working in the hospital, one of the radiation oncologists came up to me and showed me this image, the first article ever published in British Journal of Radiology on a CT scan. And I said, yeah, it's an interesting image. But I was too junior and naive at that stage to realize the significance of what I was seeing. Of course, it was hugely important. In some ways, it was not perhaps quite practical at that stage that the radiation doses the patients were getting, we'd be startled at them nowadays, but anything is possible. You just can't tell. I'd love to see what the next phase of imaging is and what they can actually do. You can just dream, and somebody will do it. Somebody somewhere is doing the research to make the impossible happen.
Yeah, I think it's ultra dynamic in medical physics, in whether it's in radiology or whether it's in radiation therapy. And I'm sure medical physics people have to now gear up a lot. You need to be a very quick learner nowadays to learn all those new technology. I think in every 2 or 3 months you'll have new advancements, whether it's radiology or nuclear medicine or radiation therapy. So I'm sure it's pretty amazing seeing things changing so fast.
Yes.
So, finally, many young medical physicists across Asia Oceania region will be watching this interview. Based on your own journey or an experience, what life lessons or the words of wisdom would you like to share with the next generation? If there is one message you hope a young medical physicist remember throughout their career, what it would be?
What would it be? It would be most medical physicists want to get into research, but really most are doing clinical work and they feel they can't really contribute. Everyone can contribute by getting very involved in their National Medical Physics Society and helping to push the profession forwards. The profession doesn't rely purely on technology and the latest research. It advances on people doing things. And one thing you can do is get in there and push the profession forwards. I feel as though I've pushed it forwards quite a lot from what I've managed to achieve. Um, in fact, for about half of my career, I wasn't actually doing medical physics as such, not research as such. I was looking at the education side and the policy side and things like that. They're all important. Um, they're what drive the profession forwards more than the technology. So get involved in that. It's very satisfying to see that you're helping the profession and it's helping your colleagues.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. And those structures and the education uh, policies, what you have made at that point of time, is getting us fruits now. So now the medical physics education is pretty structured all over the world, I guess. So I'm sure your contributions are really remarkable. So, Dr. Ram, thank you very much for sharing your experiences, reflection, and wisdom with us today. Your journey reminds us that the growth of medical physics depends not only on the technological innovations, but also on a dedicated individuals who invest in education, mentorship, opportunities for the future generation. On the behalf of Perform, thank you once again for your invaluable contributions to our profession and for inspiring medical physicists all across the Asia Oceania region and the world. Thank you everyone for joining us today for this episode. We are looking forward to see you again for our next conversation with another distinguished expert. Until then, take care and stay inspired. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.